I have been a ship's physician for 19 years, and I have learned that the worst injuries are rarely the ones you can see first. So when the Halcyon Meridian sensors flagged 12 heat signatures aboard a drifting pilgrim-ferry with no working reactor and 11 hours of air left, I did not wait for the away team to suit up. I went to the bridge and asked Captain Oyleran for the shuttle. "Alone?" she said. "They've been refused twice already," I told her. The logs from the relay buoy are public. 2 compact vessels flagged them as an Osira cluster and moved on without hailing. A third one hailed them only long enough to recommend containment protocol. I am not adding a 4th ship that looks at them like a hazard. Oyleran pulled the buoy log up on the main display while I spoke, and I watched her read it the way I had, the clipped shorthand of 2 captains who had decided, independently, that the safest response to a dying vessel was distance. Neither had lied outright. One entry simply read, "Cluster signature confirmed, non-priority, proceeding." The other offered the ferry a data packet on self-isolation procedure and continued on course without slowing. "You understand what boarding alone means if the containment literature turns out to be right," Oyleran said. It wasn't quite a question. Most of that literature was written by people who never set foot on an Osira vessel, extrapolating from one incident 40 years old. I'd rather be wrong once than be the 4th ship that looked away. She didn't need me to say more than that. She gave me 40 minutes and a locked comm line, and I took both. The Osira are not common this far from their home cluster, and what little the compact database says about them is mostly fear dressed as caution. Single Osira mind distributes itself across a linked group of bodies, never fewer than 9, never more than 14, sharing sensation, thought, and will, the way my own 2 hands share a nervous system. To most of the galaxy, this reads as contagion waiting to happen. 3 species I know of have standing orders to reduce any Osira cluster found without an escort, which is a clean word for something that is not clean at all. I did not know, boarding the Auralite Vigil, whether the 12 I was about to meet had ever once been approached by someone who didn't flinch. The ferry's chapel deck was the only compartment still holding pressure, and that was where I found them. 12 bodies of wildly different ages and old injuries, arranged in a loose ring around a cold prayer lamp, each one breathing shallow and slow in the same rhythm, like a single set of lungs wearing 12 chests. Every head turned toward me at once. That should have unsettled me. It didn't. Their eyes were not predatory. They were simply waiting to see what I would do with the door now that it was open. "I'm Imogen Castellan," I said. "I'm a doctor. I'm not here to contain you. I'm here to treat you." For a long moment, none of the 12 mouths moved. Then the nearest one, an old body, silver-scaled, half its right side scarred from some long-healed fire, spoke, and I understood that I was hearing one voice choose which throat to use. "You have already used a forbidden word," it said. "Treat, not detain, not process." We had prepared ourselves for the other words. "I know," I said. "I read what happened with the last 2 ships." "Then you know we expected a 4th silence. Or a 4th refusal, dressed politely," the voice said. "We sent the signal regardless. A mind does not stop calling out simply because it has learned the answer is usually no." I knelt by the nearest body, a small one, young by the softness of its scales, its breathing thinnest of the 12, and began the only thing I know how to do in a room like that, which is work. I did not ask them to explain themselves further. I did not ask what a shared mind feels like, or whether pain in one body registered in all 12, though I would learn the answer to that before the hour was out. It does, distributed and dulled, the way a single hand can hold weight for a whole body. I opened my kit and began triage the way I would for any patient. Airway, pulse, core temperature, the frostbite creeping up through worn boots, the dehydration in cracked lips repeated 11 more times down the ring, like a terrible echo. What struck me, working through them one body at a time, was how carefully they had rationed themselves. The oldest bodies had given their share of the last heating cell to the youngest. The strongest had taken the coldest positions nearest the hull breach, shielding the others with their own mass, the way you'd expect from 12 separate and devoted people, rather than one mind protecting itself. When I asked about it, the voice, now coming from a different mouth, a broad-shouldered body missing 2 fingers, answered simply, "We are one will. We are not one body. Each of these hands still chooses to give. I asked how long they had been adrift. The answer came slowly, passed between mouths like something carried carefully so it wouldn't spill. 41 days since the ferry's reactor failed. Longer since the home cluster stopped answering hails. A quarantine line drawn around Osira space after an incident the compact database still calls one word: containment. Without explaining what it contained or why. This group of 12 had been mid-pilgrimage when the line closed behind them, cut off from the rest of the choir's larger body. I worked through frostbite, through raw places where restraints from an earlier, rougher rescue attempt had scarred 2 wrists, through a fracture in the youngest body's collarbone that no one had set, because no one left, had been uninjured enough to set it. None of them flinched from my hands. I understood, somewhere around the 6th body, that this was itself a kind of vigilance. 12 individuals choosing, together, not to brace against a stranger's touch, even though every prior stranger had given them reason to. The shuttle wasn't built to carry 12. I called it in anyway, and told the Halcyon Meridian to clear the forward medical bay and warm every berth, and told Captain Oyalaran I'd need a second run. She didn't ask why I hadn't simply flagged them for standard transport and let the crew handle the rest by protocol. I think she already knew the answer standing in front of her, that a species which had been quarantined, refused, and nearly reduced twice over, did not need one more set of hands in gloves and a visor. They needed someone willing to touch them without one. We made the crossing in 2 trips. On the second, the smallest body, the one with the thinnest breath, woke briefly as I carried it up the ramp, and its eyes found mine with the particular clarity of someone surfacing from very deep water. "You came alone," it said, in the same shared voice, softer now. I did. "The others sent ships, you sent a person." I didn't have an answer worth giving out loud, so I didn't try. I just kept walking. By the time all 12 were settled in the medical bay, 4 lines threaded, Burns dressed, the youngest breathing easier under warmed blankets, while the eldest, the silver-scaled one, watched over the row with the quiet vigilance of a parent who has finally been allowed to rest. The shared voice spoke once more, low, almost to itself. We had begun to believe that when someone finally answered, it would be with a needle meant to end us rather than heal us. We had rehearsed how the 12 of us would face that together. We had not rehearsed this. "You don't have to rehearse it," I said. "You're safe here, all 12 of you." I stayed in that bay long after my shift ended, because I have learned that the second worst thing you can do to a frightened patient is treat them and vanish. Near the edge of sleep, the youngest body's hand found mine, and held it, not desperately, just certainly, the grip of someone confirming that a thing which had arrived was still there. Captain Oyalaran came down near the end of that first night, not to inspect the patients, but to stand quietly at the edge of the bay, the way a commander does when she wants to be present, without being asked anything of. She watched the row of berths a long while before she spoke. 12 bodies, she said. 1 patient chart. 1 patient, I agreed. Filed under a single name, if they'll give us one. They did, near dawn ship time, when the silver-scaled eldest was strong enough to speak without the others carrying the words. They called themselves the Amarel Choir, a name none of the 3 ships before us had thought to ask for, because a hazard needs no name, only a classification. I wrote it into the chart in full, and did not abbreviate it. I still think, some nights, of that first held image. The Auralite Vigil's chapel deck growing small behind us through the shuttle's rear port. 12 linked lives carried out of a silence 3 other ships had been willing to leave them in. Not a fleet, not an armada, 1 ramp, lowered, and open. It is not the largest rescue I have ever taken part in. It is the one I am proudest of, because generosity, I have come to believe, is not measured in how much you send. It is measured in whether you were willing to walk in first, with your hands empty and open, and let someone who expected to be feared discover instead that they had finally, after so long, been simply seen.